All right, here we go. Thank you, everybody. I am fired up. I am ready to go. I have my friend, Karen Finney, who doesn't need an introduction, but I'll tell you, she was press secretary for Hillary Clinton. She is currently a featured guest on CNN talking about American politics, talking about what we need to do next. And Karen and I have known each other 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
And it's an extraordinary thing. Finney and I went sailing in Sydney Harbor in Australia one time. And it was fascinating because it was a great trip with President Clinton, but we didn't care about that. We were excited about the sailing and so on. And I think you and I ended up being ballast or something like that.
Yes, I think that's right. I think but the thing in the story that you have to tell is there was like a group of us and you convinced a group of professional actual sailors who were competing that day to put like a couple of us on each boat. So it was just amazing. And we was in Sydney Harbor and it was like the funnest trip ever.
It was so great. And I think we finished fifth. I'm going to say,
I was
going to say we finished first because no one could check, but we weren't first. We were.
No, I'm pretty sure we weren't. We were just there for the experience.
Well, this is a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity to check in on one of the great minds in American politics today.
Thank you,
and I'm going to give you a couple of things, and then I want to talk about the poll that came out today. 4 million new workers have been created under Joe Biden. 4 million. We had a record 185,000 again in the jobs report last month. We have 3.5% unemployment. It's the lowest it's been since World War II. And it was extraordinary. This economy is on fire. We're creating construction jobs. Right now, there is a net need in construction industry for another 650,000 jobs. So we're doing the things we got to do. Karen, I want to thank you again for being on today. And I guess sort of the general question with those numbers is, what does Joe Biden need to do in the next 4 months to make sure we win this election?
Oh, a lot of things. I mean, first of all, we've got to keep talking about, and not just Joe Biden himself, but conversations like this. Like, we've got to go where people are and have these conversations. So that is online. I'm a big believer in paid digital advertising, using social media, doing podcasts, doing, streaming shows, because that's where people are these days. And that's really where they're getting their news and information. Obviously, I work on a cable news television show, so I'm happy when people tune into that too. But I think we just have to be realistic. And I think the campaign is actually doing a very good job of diversifying and thinking about how we talk about, it's funny, Ed, because when you and I first were in politics, right, it was about the message of the day. And it would be one message, so a jobs message all day, one day. But as you know, these days, that's not how it is. It's there could be 10 messages, 10 things happening, but also how our message is really content, right? Whether that airs on a television station or it's content that is, put on Facebook or some other streaming platform. So I think one of the most important things I need to keep doing is talking about his record, talking about and reminding people too, this is so important, to remember where we were when he came into office, because, it was COVID. We didn't know when we were going to be out of our homes. We didn't know, what was the plan to get everybody vaccinated? When were we going to get to be back together again? And, obviously the job situation was terrible. And the disarray around the world in terms of supply chains, that was driving up our costs. So I also think it's reminding people, hey, look what we got through together as a country, right? And yes, he's created jobs, and he's kept his promises. I think that's another thing that's so important. I think character really matters to voters. And the thing is, like, you look at Joe Biden, like, he's a decent guy and he is trying really hard to solve problems. And he's kept a lot of promises. There have been roadblocks to things that he wanted to get done that he couldn't get done, which we can talk about. But certainly on the economy, he got the infrastructure bill package done. Nobody's got that done.
with Republican support, unbelievably.
Right? I mean, and that is putting money back into communities all across the country, and people don't really know about it.
The 10,000 bridges, like actual physical bridges that we've redone, miles and miles and miles of highway, all kinds of things, off ramps. That new off ramp paid for you by Joe Biden. Thank you very much.
And the thing about that's so important that I think people forget. Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan, talked about this in her first race for the governor, where she talked about fixing the damn roads. If you are a middle class person and the roads you're driving on, the bridges you're driving on, if you pop a tire and you have to get towed, miss work, get that tire replaced, it actually can be an economic issue. I mean, I think about here in the DC metro area, people who are trying to figure out, the Key Bridge, in Baltimore is down, what they're going to be doing, right? So like these issues, now look, it's not every day that a vessel is going to come crashing into your bridge, but point being, these things matter, and they matter in people's everyday lives in ways that are more concrete than I think people realize.
All right, let me ask you another question. Let me ask you about everybody says the constituency that we have to grab, we have to appeal to, are suburban women in places like Philadelphia, Madison, Wisconsin, places, Charlotte, North Carolina, places that we have to go in and get women. How's Biden overall been doing with women voters?
Yeah.
Appealing to Republican, more conservative women voters. And what are the 1, 2, 3 things you tick off on your hand that he needs to do more of?
Yeah, the Kaiser Family Foundation came out with a great poll today, really looking at this issue. And he needs to win all women. And can I just say, Ed, here's one of the things I always like to level set with people, right? Because when we hear these numbers being thrown around, we have to remember that President Biden has to do what he did in 2020 in terms of the putting together that coalition of voters, plus. So he has to add on more women. He's got to get more of the Black vote, more of the Latino vote. Donald Trump can get like 2% more of the Black vote, 2% more of the Latino vote, and pull back some of the female vote, and he could win. I mean, so, it's so asymmetrical. I always think it's important that we remind people of that.
Right.
But so with regard to women, a couple of things, right? The inflation in the economy is one of the top issues. We know that. And I think here again, talking about the things that he is actually doing to lower costs. Obviously, the $35 insulin and the cap on out-of-pocket payments for medicine is going to.
Hey, one more thing about the insulin thing real quick. What was the price of insulin? It was what the market would bear, right?
Pretty much. Depending upon your health insurance, you could be paying hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars for your insulin.
And how much is it now?
Right. And it's going to be $35. Jesus. And I'll tell you again, this is something that people don't always think about, but you and I are in this generation. Hillary Clinton used to talk about the sandwich generation. Like when you get to that point where you've got kids and you've got older family members that you're caring for. So what if you have an older family member who's on insulin, who you're helping take care of, and you're trying to do your life, and you've got kids? It isn't. So it's an economic issue as well as a healthcare issue. And so with women, obviously the economy is important. And so talking about trying to bring down costs, but also reproductive freedom is critically important to us. And this is an issue where independent women, as well as suburban women, really, really are with us, right? Yeah. Because they don't want government telling them what we can do with our bodies. And I'll tell you, Ed, it's not just it's not just abortion. I actually just wrote a piece for CNN.com. It's access to contraception too. Wow. And we've got, Democrats have worked hard to get that on the ballot in a number of states. They've fought off extreme measures that Republicans have been trying to pass in the states. that would restrict access to different types of contraception. And so those issues, and now we've got IVF. So I think this conversation about reproductive freedom, but also, that connects to democracy, and it connects to this idea about our rights, and how do we think, particularly as women, how do we think about ourselves, our bodies, our lives? I always say, if we're not equal and I don't have control of my body, then we're not a democracy.
Yeah.
And I think so. Those are a couple of big issues. But one other thing I did want to say on this, the other thing that we're seeing with women that's really important, character actually matters to women voters in a different way than it does to men. And this is another place where I think President Biden really, he just has to be, let Joe be Joe, because as I said, he is a good, decent man trying to do the right thing. The other guy, we know his agenda. He's all about himself. He's all about retribution. He's going after the president's son, who's a recovered addict, for God's sakes,
right,
simply to try to do what he did to Hillary Clinton in 2016, and that is just muddy the waters, right?
It's curious for me because the Republicans, or the RNC, or the Trump campaign, I'm not sure who, they seem to be pretty good at getting talking points out quickly. I was on a debate a couple of weeks ago, and the Republican consultant, great guy, Tim Rosales, he said to me, well, a lot of the people, I said, 34 indictments, 34 convictions. I mean, that's got to mean something to people. He goes, you know what? People don't trust government. People don't trust the judiciary or the, I said, people don't trust the police. I thought these were the police lovers,
right,
that couldn't do without it. How does the average voter sort of discern or distill through those talking points? Yeah. And I have a suggestion, which is multiple sources, but you have to find some way to balance that view.
Yeah. For me, and particularly for Black and Brown communities, I think part of it is we have to acknowledge that there's work to be done. And that's part of why Biden tried to pass the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act. I mean, there is so much work to be done, but by and large, our system works. And by the way, in New York State, in New York City, it worked. 12 people went into a courtroom, they listened to the evidence, they deliberated, and they came out and they rendered a decision. And as much as Trump wants to, spit on the process and undermine the process, that's what happened. And that's what's supposed to happen. And sure, there are places and spaces where it doesn't work like it's supposed to, but it worked in this instance quite well. And so to my mind, I think part of it is we have to acknowledge that, yes, there's still work to do, but I think we also have to acknowledge that the system worked. Right. Trump doesn't like accountability. He doesn't like the fact that he actually, finally was held accountable.
Maybe for the first time, right? For the first time, right? It seems like.
Yeah. I mean, and, think about it, attacking Alvin Bragg and but so, he doesn't like it, but that doesn't mean, and that's the other thing, it's like, you can't just be for the system when it works for you. Come on. And this is another place where
I'm sorry to laugh, but it seems so obvious.
I know, right?
But it seems like stating the obvious doesn't help us in any way these days.
You know what, though, Ed? I wonder about that, because I feel like we have to maybe, I remember in 2016 watching Trump come down that escalator. Mm-hmm. And then he said those horrible things. And I thought, is that the floor or the ceiling in terms of how bad this could get?
Right.
Turns out it was neither, because he can go much lower and there's no ceiling high enough to the tolerance level of the Republican Party to his madness. But I think we can't let ourselves get complacent about and normalize it. I think that's why we have to keep saying this is not normal. Right. Because if we don't, especially for our young people who don't know, we have to remind them this is not how it's supposed to work.
I'm going to give you a couple of more stats here.
Yeah.
Inflation is at 3% in the last 12 months, and the economy is on fire. Inflation has stagnated and is not going anywhere right now. The Bureau of Labor Statistics tells me there are 1.6 job openings per unemployed person in the United States. I mean, the jobs are there. Go out and get them.
Yeah.
The last thing I want to get to with you is there are more of us than there are of them. I mean, my dad used to say, God loves poor people because he made so many, right? How do we get Dems to come home? Is that an issue? Because who gives you a harder time, Karen, the Republicans or the Democrats, right?
You know, there are days where I'm like, look, y'all, we gotta not helpful if you're like hitting us from behind when we're trying to. Yeah, look, I want to be very clear. We can win this election.
Right.
And personally, I refuse to lose to this man. I refuse, because of what it will mean for our country, what it means for, and when we say democracy, I know that sounds really something esoteric for people, but it's our basic rights and freedoms, right? Because as we know, the Supreme Court, they've already said they're willing to go after, for example, the right to privacy. There'll be nothing,
right,
no one to then come in and say, well, let's codify a right to privacy in federal law with a Donald Trump. He doesn't care about us. He cares about himself. So I refuse to lose, and I believe we can win.
Right on.
Right?
As one person in California, what can I do? What's the one thing I could do today to try and make a difference for reelecting Joe Biden? What's one thing I could do?
Well, you're doing it, having the conversation and trying to talk to people, right? And I think I really mean that, because, you know, we just have to keep telling the truth and the facts and hoping that people who need to hear it are hearing it. Because here's the thing, Joe. I mean, you know, Joe Biden is such a good guy, you know, Ed. And I think, to your point, like, what do we do to get Democrats to come home? I'll tell you one of the most important things we can do. We have to remind our voters that their votes matter, right? Their votes matter. And what I say to people is, you know, because you voted in 2020, that's why we have insulin at $35.
Right.
That's why we have a Black woman vice president and a Black woman on the Supreme Court.
Right.
That's why, right? Like, you did that. He was the person, you know, we voted for him. He understood what our needs and concerns were, and he's been fighting the fight. And I think that's a big piece of it, right? Is reminding people that voting is your power and it does matter. And those numbers that you just talked about, right? You did that. If you voted for Joe Biden, you actually are responsible for that.
Right on. Right on. What a day. What a great conversation to have. Oh my God. I love you, Finney, so much. I gotta do one thing, which is going to crack you up. But
okay.
A shout out to our sponsor, Tiger Eye Design. Tiger Eye Design, printing everything that you need for whatever you need. Campaigns, Democrats only. And if you need it tomorrow, don't call us. I mean, we're not going to get it there tomorrow. But I want to say that it's a great honor to hear you and to hear your voice on television in the middle of these CNN things. And when they flip to Finney, I know it's going to be good.
Thank you so much, Ed. That really means a lot to me.
It means a lot to me and all of us. We got a huge crew of us out there that are Finney fans.
Oh.
All right, God, I think that's the end of the show.